Are you looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this football and basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projections for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the PrizePicks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, PrizePicks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/bluewire and use code BLUEWIRE. That's code BLUEWIRE at prizepicks.com/bluewire for a first deposit match of up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for 1 bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Hello, friends. Welcome to Mavs Moneyball After Dark. This is Kirk Henderson, and today I'm joined by fellow editor Ben Zadell. How are we doing, Ben?
Doing good, Kirk. How you doing?
I am okay. So we've been pumping out a fair amount of audio content recently. The most recent one up on the feed was one I recorded last week with Matt Moore about overs and unders and win totals, all sorts of stuff. And that was actually really fun. But you and I have been trying, just due to life and things getting in the way, we were going to reconvene to do our next round of player previews, but we needed them to, go through our site first. And we have 5 more guys to talk about, which is fun because I think some of these guys are we have a couple of guys that we're not going to have too much to say, and then 3 guys who are like real rotation to rotation potential players to where we should have some more to discuss than just like JaVale McGee, even though we ended up making it a pretty good pretty lengthy podcast anyways. So let's just sort of jump right into it. So the first guy that we were going to talk about, he's on the roster. The Mavericks gave him a 1-year deal. Why they gave him a 1-year deal is something I think we're going to be talking about the further we get into the season. I don't entirely understand how this happened. You wrote about him. He was the Mavericks sort of vibes guy last year in Theo Pinson. So you wrote the player preview for this one, which was a labor of love to a degree. So why don't you take the floor with this?
Yeah. One thing that interested me is I don't think, at least, I've been watching NBA really intensely for like the last 15 years at least. I don't remember an instance like this where a guy went from like this end of the bench vibes curator, as we like to say, into an actual contract. That really never happens. Usually it's just a fun story for a guy at the end of the bench on a playoff run, just like the Mavericks had. They usually don't give them contracts. So it's kind of weird that happened. Though I guess the easy thing to say is that, they thought his contributions in the locker room and off the bench were enough to justify that contract, plus the obvious lack of depth on the roster. There's, for the 3rd year in a row, there's just not a deep team. So I guarantee if they had a little bit of a deeper roster, it would have been tougher to justify having Theo on the team. That being said, I mean, he does bring some of the ostensibly bring some of the skills that they need. He can, score a little bit in theory. He's got some of those tools. So I can see the idea. It's just, it seems really roster dependent.
I mean, to me, and this is, it's never any of these guys' fault. Also, really terrible audio for me to start with my mic not in front of my mouth. So that is probably slightly problematic for everyone. Realize that. Apologize, guys. I just don't know how to feel about it because I don't understand. He is, in my kind of opinion, he's not really an NBA player at all. And that's not like his fault. He didn't, when you get offered to sign a contract, you go ahead and pick it up. But
right.
It's just one of these things to where the NBA actually implemented rule changes specifically to deal with the things that he was doing on the Maverick bench. And so if you're mitigating the one thing the guy was bringing to the table in terms of, standing up, wearing, like wearing specific colored clothing on the bench, like all sorts of kind of really hilarious, like trolley tactics. If you can't do those things, then what are we on the team for?
Yeah.
Maybe he is that valuable to what Dallas wants to do in terms of mood. Maybe he'll prove me wrong and get out there on the floor. It's just he's never really had a 3-point shot. He doesn't really have like that one definable NBA skill where you go, oh, okay, that's why he's out there. And as we've been watching in these preseason games, we're sort of looking for someone to pop. And he's just one of a number of guys who just, he's a bottom, he's one of the guys that's in the NBA that's kind of, one of the bottom 100 out of the 450 players in the league. And that's, it's neither here nor there. It's just, I just don't understand why they gave him a deal. Just to be honest, other than the fact that he must have, aged out or whatever it was. They couldn't give him another 2-way deal, something of that nature.
Right. Well, he's a very interesting, I guess, a microcosm of what they've been doing the last few years. We've seen they're really not interested in bringing in like a veteran on a 1-year minimum, like a guy at the end of this career. Like let's say Eric Bledsoe. Nobody's picked up Eric Bledsoe. You think that they would rather, a team that just went to the Western Conference Finals would rather have even if they're kind of washed like Eric Bledsoe, someone with some experience. Maybe they get a late career rejuvenation playing for a contract. But they've completely gone away from that. That was something they did, in that early decade after the championship when they were chasing guys like Charlie Villanueva, Darren Williams, at the end of their career. And they just, and it spanned not just Nico Harrison, but Donnie Nelson.
Yeah, it's been like 10 years of this sort of thing.
Yeah, so it's been a weird 2 to 3 year run of them. Just you would think with a team that is making deep playoff runs, you'd want a few veterans on the end of the bench, and they've completely gone away from that. They're not interested in that. Every interesting 1-year minimum vet that we've all kind of put forth, like, hey, what about this guy? What about this guy? It comes out quick that they have no interest in it. So it's a really weird.
I sort of think in this specific year, because they're paying luxury tax this year for the first time in a while. When you pay those veterans, there's a multiplying factor because how long you've been in the league sets your minimum contract value. Where you pay a guy like a guy who's been in the league 10 years a significant amount more than you pay in a guy who's been in the league like 0 to 1 year. So I honestly think that plays a part in this.
Well, I could be wrong. We'd have to talk with our Mavs CBA guy. But I believe they only paid the luxury tax on that, the minimum. It's hard to explain because I'm not good at this. Again, and CBA is not my thing. But let's say the 1-year minimum guy is 200,000 and the 10-year guy is 800,000. I think either way, they still only pay that luxury tax on the 200,000. So I think it really doesn't save them that much. I could be wrong. Again, that's something for our Mavs CBA guy to answer.
We may have to follow up about that one because I'm a little curious because I've just sort of thought this was something that was a part. But with Theo, let's just sort of summarize it like this. If he actually is playing minutes for the Mavericks, then things have gone really awry.
Things really bad, or he has shocked everybody.
Right, which would be nice, but it's just it's a hard thing to sell. The next guy we want to talk about is one we've only seen play 1 game since January, and that's Tim Hardaway Jr. Matthew Phillips wrote this one, and Tim is a guy I kind of have a special place in my heart for. He's a kind of player I think most people would assume that I would just sort of react poorly to. But I found how he was sort of the albatross as part of the KP contract and then turned himself around into such like a positive player for the team. And then when, he signed this, he took a bit of a discount to stay with the Mavericks. We know what he was offered by New Orleans. And then we see what a team like Miami pays for a guy like Tyler Hero, which is almost 13 to 14 million more a season than Tim Hardaway makes. And I'm sitting here and looking at Tim Hardaway, who is a 30-something shooter, who is a pretty good athlete, terrible defender, but honestly has really great shot making ability. And I think, okay, this is fine. Tim will have a home with the Mavericks. Where I am kind of curious is how they fit him back into the team, because the offense really started to take off right after he got hurt. Now, I don't relate that to him. It's just there's only so many shots to go around, and he's sort of a volume-based guy. So how they fit him into the offense and where he, because he might have had 4 good games all last year. You go look at that man's game log. It was brutal. He hit his season high in threes in the second game of the season, I believe. Like, it was something really bleak. And he just never found footing. He never really found much consistency. And his three-point shooting dropped by like a ridiculous percentage from the year prior. And to me, it was more a sign of comfort more than anything else. And I hope he finds what he had, against the, with the Mavericks in his contract year, because the Mavericks can honestly use him.
Yeah. So what I was wondering with him was, the unfortunate timing of that injury of his in January was also about the time that everybody on the Mavericks who was struggling started to come around. We're talking about Dorian Finney-Smith and especially Reggie Bullock. They weren't shooting great early on in the season. And then around January is when everybody started to coalesce. Who knows what? I mean, was that the case of kind of figuring out how to live around Porzingis, and then once he's traded,
I think he played a ton of his minutes with Porzingis.
Yeah. So and it looked like early on last season that the kid and the coaching staff was asking more of these role players than they had been previously asked to do by Rick Carlisle and going backwards. So, did that get in their head? And then as we saw going through the season, they were asked to do less. They weren't asked to, drive with the ball like they were early in the season. Plus they just got more comfort with kids' coaching style in the offense. So would Hardaway have done the same thing? Would his numbers have improved? Because his shooting numbers were kind of like what we were getting when he came over from New York. That last season in New York, it was pretty poor shooting. And so would he have rounded into form is my question. Who can say, but I would hope so. But either way, even if you'd like it to be more consistent, but at least having that threat of a guy coming off the bench or starting, maybe, who knows, that could, any point just erupt for 27 points because he goes like 7 of 11 from the 3-point line. That's a benefit.
Yeah, and the defensive element of what he can do, or rather what he can figure out how to do, is really important. Tim is historically a terrible defender, and the Mavericks need him to be able to fit into their scheme in some way. He doesn't have to be perfect, but he can't be terrible.
Yeah.
And it's really effort based, and Tim plays hard. So I think that if they can sort of, show him where it needs to be, where he needs to be throughout the course of, the first 30 games, then maybe they can hammer together something for the second half of the year. It depends kind of who he's playing with. That's if he's coming off the bench with Spencer Dinwiddie and Christian Wood, maybe the Mavericks aren't that concerned about defense at all anyways.
Right.
Maybe they're just going to be more scoring attuned, and it may not matter because they just have these players that are really big non-contributing factors on one end of the ball. Wood has been one of them, and Tim's another, but both of those guys can absolutely fill up the basket too. So maybe there's something there. I'm really looking forward to Tim play though, because last year, by the end of the playoffs, it was so clear they needed another body that could do things. And I think he's proven enough to where he could play 15 to 20 minutes in a playoff game, and you're like confident that he can do something. So
he can definitely score, and that's, he's not a non-factor on that offensive end, so that always helps.
Yep. Well, then the next guy we're going to pivot to is someone that Matt Gilroy wrote about, and we've not seen him in preseason mainly because he has these knee problems, which I think are just going to be the mark of his rest of his career, is Davis Bertans. Davis was a really fun addition to the Mavericks last year. He plays so freaking hard, but if he's not healthy, and he's not healthy right now, I'm a little worried about what that means for any sort of contribution, because he's not quite good enough to be in the rotation. And that's likely for the best, but you still want a guy to be healthy. And if health is going to be, his knee effusion, I think is what they're calling the injury right now. Like, that doesn't sound great. That's just kind of a lingering knee. He played in the World Cup, which was good, but the Latvia or here they got, he and Kristaps Porzingis got knocked out pretty early. So it's, I don't have strong feelings about his play, other than I really got a kick out of watching him play in the same way I did with Tim Hardaway, where it's just like when he's on fire, it's really kind of horrifying.
Yeah, right.
Because it's just like, it's like the old Nintendo Game Shark from when we were kids, where it's like, oh, there's just a cheat code on with this guy pulling 40-foot jumpers just at will.
Yeah, he might be more useful in the postseason, honestly. And I know that sounds crazy, just because of his lack of defense. I mean, I swear I've never seen a guy so tall just get completely scored on at the rim.
Like Goran Dragic turned him into Swiss cheese.
Yeah, they just go right into his chest, and he bounces off, and it's an easy layup. But what I mean by that in the playoffs, he offers some roster flexibility. Much like, I hate to compare everything to the 2011 finals, but the way Peja Stojakovic provided some shooting in one series, every now and then you just hit a certain series where a guy fits specifically for what you want to do for that series. And it's so, you can always use a shooter on your team. So the concern, like you're talking about with the knee stuff, for shooters, if you've got leg problems, that can affect your shot, because a lot of, so much of your shot comes from your legs. So that's a concern. But overall, like I said, I think he's more of a, can help facilitate a trade if necessary.
Well, he's going to be on. I think he's going to be on the Mavericks for a while, because his contract is tough. They have 3 more years of Davis Bertans. It's an additional year on top of whatever KP had. And it was just a smaller bite at the apple, and you assume maybe down the line you could figure out something with it. But I honestly think they may just sort of have to deal with him and the contract and see what they can get. Seems to be a good vibes guy. I think his teammates seem to like him. He's just such a different looking player. Like, he's got this big bushy red beard. Like, teams tend to underestimate him because of how he looks, and he's. He had a couple chase from behind blocks. Like, he's hilarious to watch, because he might be the hardest running. I don't think he's the fastest player. Right. He might be the hardest running player in the NBA. So I really enjoy that. The next guy we'll pivot to then is sort of directly linked to somebody that we talked about earlier, and that's Reggie Bullock, who had a really rough 2021. And then by the end of January 2022, right around the time Tim Hardaway basically, we lost Tim Hardaway to a season-ending injury, Bullock started to find his way and became a stalwart aspect of the offense and of the defense, wherein just ended up being huge for the Mavericks down the stretch. He found his shot. He was locked in on defense, and it's sort of hard to imagine the Mavericks without Reggie Bullock at this point. And I mentioned Tim Hardaway's volume earlier. He and Bullock each need 6+ threes a game to sort of have value. And the Mavericks have to figure out and get those shots for those guys, because Bullock if you go look at Bullock's box scores, he has a whole bunch of 1 for 4 nights to start the season last year. And it's what is Dallas doing? And then it's things turn around, and he shot. Who wrote? Did you write this one? And
I wrote that one.
You wrote this one. How in January and February he just he could not miss, shooting 42 and 45% from 3. He cooled down a little bit later in the year and then heated back up for the playoffs. I mean, I just don't know. I know what to expect from Bullock, in that there's going to be times when his shot's not falling, but he will always play hard and he will always play good defense.
Yeah, and he's that threat on that 3-point line, which kind of matters more than actually hitting them sometimes. Because if you go January and February shooting 42, 45%, March, even if that falls off a little bit, I think he started hitting like 33 to 34% in March. Defense are still going to respect that based on the last couple of months. They're going to have the game, that game film of like, oh, this guy's hitting, they've got the stats too. So it was really weird that, that was one of the things we went into last season, the first couple months, thinking really weird that the Mavericks went out and got this guy. He really was one of, a free agent acquisition for a need that they had. And it made sense for him to start. And then he didn't start. In fact, he played really low minutes. I think it was like in like the low 20s. Like 23 minutes per game in that first couple months of the season. And it was really weird of like, hey, last year, all we wanted was more wings. We need more wings that can shoot. We went out and signed a guy who can shoot and you're not playing him. It was really strange. And then it's like his play by January and February, kid couldn't keep him off the court. It was, a really weird situation. That's why I titled the article, he clawed his way into a starting spot. Because it looked like kid at the beginning of the season did not trust him. I don't know why. It was a really weird. I don't if they've crossed paths before some point, in the past on another team. I'm not sure. But he just did not have that trust in Reggie Bullock, or maybe it came through, opening training camp last year. But now we saw in the playoffs, his minutes per game in the playoffs ended up being something kind of reasonable because of the way the Golden State series worked out. I think he got down to like 37 or 38. But before that, he was averaging like 42 minutes per game. Like they could not take him off the court. And so it's really crazy how he went from this, I think starting like 12 games the first half of the season to basically being unable to get off the court. That you could see by the end of the playoff run that he and Dorian Finney-Smith were just completely gassed. And like I said, it was because kid could not get the type of play Bullock was providing anywhere else on the team.
Yeah. And I think if you look at the contract that he signed, he probably ended up being one of the best value deals in the league. He's got 2 years left at really unbelievable value compared to what a lot of 3-and-D wings would end up getting. Yeah. It's such a steal when you look back at it. I'm really glad he's a Maverick.
Huge bargain. I think the only negative you would say is the dude cannot drive to save his life. I think it was like 88% of his shots or something like that were created or by others,
Sure. Well, then there's the last guy we have to talk about, and he's sort of been the player du jour of the preseason is Josh Green. I wrote this player preview, and I wrote it before we saw any practice tape, before we saw any fan jam, before we saw any preseason game. And I think I tried to be pretty even about it, but more or less, Josh Green is sort of, if the Mavericks are going to do something special this year, it will be because Josh Green found a way to absorb some of the responsibilities and minutes that have been taken by players that basically the Mavericks need to find a way to rely on less. Whether that be through point guard minutes for a few minutes a game, whether that be backup wing to Reggie Bullock and Dorian Finney-Smith, he needs to find some way to contribute regularly. He doesn't have to play perfect, but he does have to matter. And I'm a little concerned, frankly. I'm a little concerned because we found out yesterday that the Mavericks might be considering Facu Campazzo for their guard. And a lot of people are basically Facu fans told me it's like, oh, he'd be great for the team. Well, I don't see it. I would much rather the Mavericks use Josh Green and put him into a little bit of a trial by fire and figure out if he is a functional basketball player in a way that they need him. I think he will probably be in the NBA for several more years to come, at least, even if he doesn't work out this year, just because he's young enough and has the tools. Teams don't give up on tools. But to date, it just can't be understated how he's not put together any sort of consistent string of play. And it's not like there's this huge burden on him to do that. And it's just, it's such a mixed bag. I titled the post that I wrote, Josh Green is a basketball Rorschach test. And it's, I don't know, I wax and wane every day because I would love it if Josh Green was actually amazing this year. And I don't have, him forcing me to eat 2 years of crow would be really delightful because it means the Mavericks would be even better than they were last year. And right now in the preseason, I just find myself a little bit concerned. What do you think?
I'm like you in that I have this 2 years of negativity towards Josh Green. He has not done anything in the last 2 years that you could say, here's, we talked about it with Theo Pinson. What is the skill that he brings that you could say, at least he has this one NBA skill, and I can't name one. He's got a little bit of a shot, but it was on low. He shot 35%, but that was on one attempt per game. That's hard to, I can't take that seriously. He shot 39% from the corners. That's something. It's something that he can, the Mavericks can use out of him. But teams now have gotten way more sophisticated about taking away those corner 3-pointers, especially on a player like him where there's not much of a threat of doing something else. His defense is, he tries. No one has said, hey, he's like a, great defender at least. That would be the biggest thing I could say about him is like, hey, the guy, you can see when he's out there, sometimes he's probably trying too hard. Because it seems like sometimes he overruns guys. It's just, you hate to fault a guy for like too much effort, but that's really the only thing I could say about him is like I've never seen the dude take a play off. He really gives it his all. I mean, that's a cliche we say all the time, but you can tell he really does.
Energy and effort, they're skills, and he's just got to find that thing, and that's why I was really, I was at first sort of mortified, but then I bought into the idea of him playing some backup guard minutes because he has shown some passing chops.
He does.
The ball handling stuff, I think, is a little different and is going to take reps and, frankly, getting used to handling the rock under pressure. That's a thing that takes time. And I would love it if he somehow became a guy who ate. If you look at the minutes distribution, it's kind of hard to figure out how many minutes he would actually need to play because the Mavericks have an 8-man rotation right now, and he would sort of be one of the 8th, 9th guys. So it's not like he's going to be playing a ton of minutes, but the NBA season is long. We're not going to have, you don't have your ideal lineup all the time. You're probably playing without one guy in your rotation, 1 out of every 3 games. It's just sort of the nature of this stuff. So for him to be able to eat up 12 minutes here, 22 minutes there, 18 minutes here, and be have a positive plus minus, whether it's also maybe hitting some shots and keeping defenses honest, that would be great. I would love it. It's just, I've not seen enough yet. Everybody got very excited about some sort of low stakes practices and things like that. And then in the last preseason game, when he got actually time to play with the real guys, he didn't really play that well. He had one cool alley-oop that he caught from Jaden Hardy, and then the next play he fell down. Yeah. And so it's like the falling down, like the miscues with Green stand out so boldly sometimes. And it's not his fault. I don't feel negative about him. I want him to take that next step because he does have the athletic ability. To me, it's largely confidence and reps based.
Well, that's what I was going to say is the concern for me is I've never once seen him look comfortable on a basketball court in the NBA. Obviously, I did not watch him play in college, so I don't know what he looked like.
He didn't look comfortable there either.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm mostly watching NBA. I don't drop in on college very often, but not once in an NBA game have I seen him look like, even in garbage time, like he looks like I know what to do out here. And that was the case. He was really raw coming in, from what I understand is, he had not played a lot of basketball coming into college even. And that's where, you could talk about the Mavericks doing a disservice to him by drafting him into a situation where he was not going to get a ton of reps. He would have probably benefited from a tanking team, a team that was in the cellar that could just afford to put out a young player like him and let him make mistake after mistake. The Mavericks are not in that case. The Mavericks are in a place where they're trying to win a lot of games every season, and they can't afford too many mistakes from a guy in their rotation. So, it's like I said, they kind of did a disservice to him because he might actually be a serviceable NBA player sometime down the road. I don't know if that's going to be with the Dallas Mavericks because, again, I've yet to see him. And maybe that changes this year. That would be awesome. Like you said, that where he actually looks like he's like, I belong out here with these guys. I belong on the court. But so far, that's not been the case. And that's been my biggest negative against him. And I know that sounds weird, but like, man, at some point I would like to see like, oh, Josh Green belongs out there. We just need to get him a little bit more time. And there was a point during the Phoenix series last year. I know they won that series, but he was playing out there, and just the way, he was part of a playoff rotation he's at the very end of that rotation, but he was part of it. And he just did not look like he belonged out there with the other guys on Phoenix or Dallas. And that's where I kind of just lost it. I was like, I'm not sure this guy's ever going to fit here in Dallas. Would love to be proved wrong.
Yep. And hopefully we will this year. Hopefully we will, because that would mean, a lot of winning basketball, which would be delightful. Well, Ben, this has been fun. We talked about 5 more guys. I think that means we've got 9 out of the way, and then there's a few more that we're going to be talking about after this. Probably we'll wait till early next week, right before the season starts, to cue that up. You got anything else before we get out of Dodge?
No, just one more preseason game, and then we're, to real stuff. We're excited.
Right. Well, guys, go ahead and check out MavsMoneyball.com. I have to go rescue my wife from 2 barking dogs. Thanks so much for your time, and we will talk to you a little later in the week.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.